Hey, how's it going? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be doing a book haul. You know, as usual, when I film these book hauls, I do have quite a lot of books because it's been a while since I filmed the last book haul. And so today we're going to be going through a lot of the books that I've hauled recently. I've bought a lot of books recently. I've been sent a lot of books recently that I'm really excited about. So the first stack of books that I have all came from Book of the Month, and some of these books were sent to me for collaborations with Book of the Month, but some of these were ones that I actually bought myself. So a few of the books that I ended up buying from Book of the Month include Incidents Around the House by Josh Mallerman, which I am very excited for this one because if you haven't heard, it's actually our October book troop book club pick this month. I can't wait to read this book very soon. I've heard that this book is a horror book that is actually like genuinely really creepy and scary, so I cannot wait to read this book. I also picked up Someone in the Attic from Book of the Month, which is also exciting because this is a new release thriller book. And if you didn't hear, this book is actually going to be our November book troop pick. So it's very exciting that Book of the Month keeps featuring books that I'm picking for my own book club. Like, it is very exciting that it works out this way, and it's why I'm such a huge fan of Book of the Month, because they're always having some of my most anticipated thrillers as selections. So that's very cool. I cannot wait to read this one with everybody in November. And then I also ended up picking up a copy of Mad Woman, which this one is a kind of literary mystery thriller from what I've heard. On the little premise on the top of this, it just says a gripping story of motherhood, mother loss, and the brutal, mighty things women have to do to keep themselves and each other alive. It sounds like it's going to be one of those really powerful, moving thrillers. And it also takes place in Portland, Oregon, which I think is very exciting. So I decided to pick up a copy, and hopefully I can get around to reading this one soon. And then I recently worked with Book of the Month, and I picked up two of their recent selections. One of their picks was Dearest for the month of October, which this is a new horror book that I am so excited about. I think this one also has to do a lot with motherhood, actually. It says a new mom in need of help opens the door to her long estranged mother, only to invite something much darker inside. Oh, this is one that sounds so good. I'm really hoping that I can get to this before the end of October, but we'll see. And then I also decided to pick up the new Sally Rooney from them. This one's called Intermezzo. Is that how you say it? Intermezzo? I don't know. I was really excited to check this one out because even though Sally Rooney has mostly been, a miss of an author for me, I mean, I've only read one or maybe two books from her, and I didn't really care for the ones that I've read in the past. But this one in particular just kind of intrigued me. I feel like her books are always very hyped, and I just want to give this one a shot to see if my reading taste has changed at all throughout the years or if this is something that I could enjoy. And so I'm really excited to check this one out. Hopefully I'll be able to read this one at some point before the end of this year. And then Penguin Random House has recently sent me a huge stack of just so many things that I'm really excited about. I mean, one of the books I could not be more excited about is this one called Blue Sisters. This is one that I've actually never read a book from this author so far, but this is a literary fiction book that follows these sisters that I've just been so curious about because I've been hearing really great things about this book. It says we're following three estranged sisters who return to their family home in New York after their beloved fourth sister's death. Oh, this one sounds like it's gonna be so emotional and so hard-hitting. But I love, literary fiction books like this that are hopefully, very well written, that follow sister relationships. These are one of my favorite kind of niche things in books. Just hearing the premise alone, it kind of sounds like that book, The Most Fun We Ever Had, which is a book that I gave 5 stars earlier this year. So I am just so freaking excited to read Blue Sisters. I'm hoping that I'll be able to read this one next month in November. That's kind of my loose plan for it right now, but I cannot wait to read this book. Oh my god, I'm so excited. They also ended up sending Here One Moment by Leanne Moriarty, and this is the same author as Big Little Lies. This is a book that I am really looking forward to because I feel like this premise is so unique and kind of weird, especially for this author to take on this subject matter. I feel like this one's gonna be really different from the rest of her books because this is one of those stories where all of these people get on this flight, and then on this flight, they all find out their fate about when they're gonna die, which is so unique and so cool. Apparently there's this one passenger on the flight that's called the Death Lady, and I guess she's the one who made this thing happen. I'm not really sure. But then it says a few months later, one passenger dies exactly as she predicted. And so it's kind of one of those stories where you're following these characters who have learned about their fate, and you kind of get to see how that impacts their lives, knowing when they're gonna die. I don't know. I love stories like this. It kind of reminds me of The Measure, which is a book that I just gave 5 stars. This premise really, really intrigues me. I cannot wait to read this. This has easily become one of my most anticipated books of the whole year. They also ended up sending me a copy of The Favorites by Lane Fargo, and this one is actually an ARC copy that I have. This one doesn't go on sale until January next year, but this is one that I'm so incredibly excited to read because Lane Fargo is a thriller author. She's the author of They Never Learn, which is one of my favorite thrillers ever, but this one is different from anything that she's ever published, I think, because this one is actually a romance story. It's says that this is an epic love story set in the sparkling, savage sphere of elite figure skating, starring a woman determined to carve her own path on and off the ice. And I'm so freaking excited to read this because I was just talking about how like I want to read about more like competitive sports, especially in my like romances and in my thriller books. And this sounds like the exact combination of things that I love reading about because I love reading about figure skating. I think that's so fascinating. And because this is from an author that I've loved before in the thriller genre, I cannot wait to see how she writes a romance story like this. So this is easily one of my most anticipated books. Like this is a 5-star prediction for me. I cannot wait to read this one. They also sent A Sunny Place for Shady People by Mariana Enriquez, which this is one that I'm so excited about. It's the same author as Our Share of Night, and this one is actually a collection of short stories, which, you know, I've talked about this before, but like any short stories that are horror tend to be some of my favorite things ever, so I literally cannot wait to read this one. I also just love this cover so much. Oh my gosh, the bright yellow is such a choice, and I am here for it. It looks beautiful in person. And then Random House also ended up sending this one called The Rich People Have Gone Away by Regina Porter. And this is one that's more of a like literary fiction book that takes place in New York. That sounds really appealing. The premise just says a diverse group of New Yorkers are brought together by the search for a missing woman. And it takes place in Brooklyn in the year of 2020. And you know, as I mentioned, I really do love literary fiction books that involve just a little bit of mystery. And the fact that it takes place in New York is a huge selling point for me. I think this one sounds incredible. I also really love this cover. Like there's just something about it that is so aesthetic. They also ended up sending a copy of Lady Macbeth by Ava Reed, and this cover, oh my god, dude, this book is stunning. This is one that I actually don't know too much about, and I think it might be a little bit out of my comfort zone, but like look at how pretty this is. Oh my gosh, when you take this off, wow, and then the freaking whole cover is like neon pink. The premise for this one just says that it's a reimagining of Lady Macbeth, which is Shakespeare's most famous villainess, giving her a voice, a past, and a power that transforms the story men have written for her. This sounds like it's gonna be one of those like good for her, you know, like a woman reclaiming her voice kind of stories, and I really love that about this. Even if it is a little bit outside of my comfort zone, like genre-wise, I don't really know what to expect, but I'm hoping that I love this because I want to keep this book on my shelves forever because it's so beautiful. They also ended up sending The Next Mrs. Parrish, which I think this one is actually a sequel to The Last Miss Parrish, which is a thriller that I read a number of years ago now, but I really enjoyed that thriller when I read it. I don't want to read the premise to you because this one is a sequel, so I don't know like what's going to give away something from the first book, but it does sound like we're following the same characters from the first book, and it says that this is a vicious game of cat and mouse where everything is on the line. I didn't actually know that Liv Constantine is the pen name for like 2 authors, but it has been a few years since I read The Last Mrs. Parrish, but I'm really curious to read this one. I think this one sounds interesting. The next one from Penguin Random House is this book called Wild Failure, and this one is actually a collection of short stories, and it is very short actually. This one is only about like 150 pages, and this one just really intrigues me because it says that we're following characters who encounter feelings of shame, desire, attachment, and disconnection as they navigate through bad decisions, unusual situations, and fraught relationships. It's really rare for me that I read short story collections like outside of like the horror genre, but honestly this one just sounds so intriguing to me that I just decided to give it a shot, and I'm really obsessed with this cover, by the way. I love this shade of blue, and I love how it's like nature all around, and it says Wild Failure. Like, I don't know, it just sounds like it could be something that I would really like. And then the last 2 books that I got from Random House are actually 2 nonfiction books. This one's called Chatter, The Voice in Our Head and Why It Matters and How to Harness It. And then I also have The Happiness Advantage, and it says How a Positive Brain Fuels Success in Work and Life. And these are 2 books that I'm hoping to read at some point because, you know, I've been trying to get more into nonfiction this year, but lately it feels like it's more about just me saying that I'm trying to get more into nonfiction this year and not actually reading a lot of nonfiction. So I'm hoping that by like, you know, hauling more books that are nonfiction books, it'll encourage me to want to read these even more. But I feel like both of these books in particular really spoke to me as something that could actually help me, and I could actually gain something from both of these, so I decided to pick these up. Alright, and then next up, Atria Books has also sent me a number of different books. One of the ones they sent that I'm so curious about is this one called The Rule of 3 by Sam Ripley. I don't really know if this one falls more into like the thriller or the horror genre, but the premise of this one just really intrigues me. It sounds so creepy and weird. It says, I didn't believe in the rule of 3, not at first. It was just one of those urban myths you hear about all the time. A story my boyfriend told me about a girl cursed by the number 3, a girl whose parents had killed themselves after her siblings had died in an accident, which meant that she was doomed to die too because that's the rule of 3. Bad things always happen in threes, they say, and they are right because it's happening again. But this time the curse is coming for me, and worst of all, it's coming for you too. Does that not sound so creepy and weird and fun? I love the idea of like a curse of three. I think that sounds like a really fun and interesting thing to read about, so hopefully this one's amazing. They also sent this arc that's called Nowhere by Allison Gunn, and this one is an arc for a book that comes out in March of 2025. But the thing that really intrigues me about this is on the back it says True Detective meets The Outsider, which is very interesting because I am a huge fan of True Detective, the TV show. It was one of my favorite freaking shows. It says this is a twisty debut about a series of disappearances in a small fundamentalist town and what one broken family must do to remain together as dark forces close in. This sounds like it's gonna be right up my alley. I just can't wait to read it. I also really love the cover, like the idea of this little girl standing behind the trees is so creepy. I also love on the inside here how they said this book was pitched as The Outsider meets Mayor of Easttown, which Mayor of Easttown is another show that I am such a huge fan of. I still haven't read The Outsider by Stephen King, but it is still on my TBR. Another exciting arc that Atria has sent to me recently is this one called Cross My Heart by Megan Collins, and this one is actually coming out in January. This one is a thriller that I know nothing about except that we're following a character who has recently gotten a heart transplant, and I think that this story is about this woman who has like recently received a heart transplant and now she's stalking the husband of the woman who gave her the heart. So like it sounds like it's gonna be interesting and weird. I don't know. I really love this cover, by the way. I love this like neon pink text on this. Megan Collins is an author that I have read from in the past. I really liked her book The Winter Sister, but then everything else from her has been mostly like either a miss or a DNF for me. So hopefully this one ends up being a success because oh my gosh, this sounds so interesting. And another thriller arc that I'm really excited about is Witness 8, and this one goes on sale March 11th next year, and this is actually the same author as Kill for Me, Kill for You, which is one of my favorite thrillers that I've read this year, so the fact that I'm even holding this is very exciting. And like Kill for Me, Kill for You, it looks like this one also takes place in New York. It says, what if the witness was more twisted than the killer? It says we're following this character Ruby who is working as a maid, and it says she witnesses a murder and she has wicked plans in mind that don't involve telling the authorities the truth. It just sounds like it's gonna be interesting. I don't know, I feel like this author writes really well. Like his thrillers are always so interesting and so engaging, so I cannot wait to read this one. They also sent an arc for this romance book called The Lodge by Kayla Olson that's coming out in January as well. This one just sounds like it's gonna be so interesting because apparently we're following this character who is an entertainment journalist, and she just got her big break in her career working as a ghostwriter. She helped write the memoir of this former member of the boy band True North, but it's about her story when she goes to this like ski resort that's in Vermont, and then she starts to fall for the guy who's giving her skiing lessons. It just sounds like it's gonna be so cute and like the perfect winter read, so I cannot wait to read this one this winter. It sounds so cute. I also recently got an arc for this book called Deadbeat by Adam Hamdy, and this one's actually an arc copy, but this one's going on sale December 3rd, so this one's coming out pretty soon. And this one is from the same author as The Other Side of Night, which is a book that I just read for the first time this year, and I loved it. It was 5 stars. This one just says it's a thriller following a desperate single father as he searches for the anonymous employer who hired him as a hitman. It sounds really interesting, and honestly, like I just cannot wait to see what this author does next after how much I loved his last book. And then they also sent me a copy of Daydream by Hannah Grace, which this is a romance book that I've just been hearing so many great things about. I do think that this one is actually the 3rd book in a series, but from what I've heard, you don't have to read the other books in order to read this one, which is exciting news because I don't think that I have any interest in the first 2 books in this series, but this one in particular does very much intrigue me. I also just love this cover. Oh my god, I know I keep saying that, but like the colors on this cover, oh my god, it is so cute. I'm also excited to read this one because the guy in this book, he's the captain of his hockey team, and then I think the girl in this book is kind of like nerdy and bookish, and she has like a book club, and it just sounds so cute, and I feel like it's gonna have really great vibes. I've just been hearing a lot of really great things about this from people that have been reading it lately, so I'm so excited to check this one out soon. And then Atria also sent me this very special exclusive edition of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which if you know me and my reading taste, you probably know that this is like one of my favorite books of all time. Like it is definitely up there, maybe in my top favorite 5 books that I've ever read in my whole freaking life. And they had this really cool exclusive edition where like, boom, look at that. Oh my gosh, all of the rings, the sprayed edges. Are you freaking kidding me? This book is stunning. And then look at the back, has this like beautiful like letter that is from Evelyn, and then when you open it like this, oh my god, look at that. Oh my gosh, beautiful. And then this, Wow. So this is so cool that they had this. Like, oh my god. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is one of my favorite books of all time, and it follows a Hollywood actress named Evelyn Hugo who was really big in like the 1950s, the 1960s, and this is like her story about like her rise to fame and like everything that ended up happening in her life and her career. It is just one of my favorite books that I've ever read. I love this book so much, so I'm so happy to have this beautiful collector's edition. And yes, I do own like several copies of Evelyn Hugo now, but I am not mad about it. All right, and then next up, St. Martin's Press ended up sending me a number of different romance books, as well as a nonfiction. So the nonfiction that I picked up from them is this one called True to You. It says this is a therapist's guide to stop pleasing others and start being yourself, which honestly is something that I feel like I could benefit from reading this as a pretty big, people pleaser. And once again, trying to get myself to read more nonfiction books because I do think that it would be good for me to do. And then some of the romance books that I picked up from them recently include this one called The Slowest Burn. This romance just really appealed to me because it looks like it's gonna be so cute. It takes place in San Francisco. Apparently the girl that we're following in this book is a top ghostwriter for celebrity cookbooks, and she's a widow. And then the guy in this book, he's a chef who has recently scored big on a reality television competition, and then she gets paired with him to help ghostwrite his first celebrity cookbook. So it sounds like it's gonna be cute. I really do love romances like this that mostly like take place in the kitchen with like food and stuff and with chefs. I think it's very fun. And then they also sent this one that's called Everyone I Kissed Since You Got Famous. This one just sounds really cute because it's a sapphic romance, and on the back here it says Hollywood glamour meets 'Tis the Damn Season, which obviously like a Taylor Swift reference, like you're immediately gonna pull me in that way. This is perfect for fans of Alexandria Bellafleur, which is an author that I am a pretty big fan of her romances. And something that intrigues me in this book is that we're following this girl who was a small town Wisconsin girl who became an A-list star. I feel like I always mention the fact that I really do love books that follow like actresses or like A-list celebrities, but then usually my experience with actually reading them is that I don't end up liking them, so I'm hoping that this can be another one that I end up falling in love with. I also ended up getting a copy of this one called Given Our History, which this one is one that I'm a little bit hesitant to read because it is a second chance romance. I believe that this was one that like they had history or they had a shared history, but I love the idea of this book because we're following this woman who is an assistant professor who has wanted to teach history since she was 14, and then it says this guy, Theodore Harrison, is brought in as a visiting scholar, and then she thinks that her plans are compromised because she like knows who he is. It sounds like it's gonna be cute and that most of it takes place during the fall, so like who knows, maybe this could be the perfect like cozy fall romance book. And then I also got a copy of this one called Can't Help Falling in Love, and this one is one that definitely intrigues me as well because in this story we're following this woman who's a struggling waitress, and then the guy is an heir to a major Seattle company. So like this one takes place in Seattle. I don't know if you can tell from the cover, there's like the little Space Needle in the background, but this one also has like a fall, it says it's the perfect fall rom-com, and it says they both stumble into a high-profile fake engagement while simultaneously trying to keep up with their own love lives in this flirty fall rom-com. That just sounds like a fun time. Like I love a fall-themed rom-com. I love that it takes place in Seattle. I think that's so fun. All right, the next two books that I have for you came from Simon & Schuster. One of the books that I ended up picking up from them is Whale Fall by Daniel Cross, and this is a horror book about how this man ends up getting swallowed by a whale when he's like out in the ocean, and then it's about like his survival and like trying to deal with that. Yeah, I actually read this book very recently for a vlog that's going to be coming out very soon. And then they also ended up sending a copy of this book called Hum by Helen Phillips, and this one is like a sci-fi kind of book that just sounds so intriguing. It says this is an extraordinary novel about a woman who undergoes a procedure that renders her undetectable to surveillance, but at what cost? It takes place in a near future world that has been inhabited by intelligent robots called hums, and she loses her job to artificial intelligence. It says that this story explores marriage, motherhood, and selfhood in a world compromised by global warming and dizzying technological advancement. This one sounds so interesting. This one actually is from the same author as The Need, which is a book that I personally DNF'd, but this one does sound very intriguing and I can't wait to check it out. And then Wednesday Books ended up sending me a copy of this one called Annie LeBlanc Is Not Dead Yet, and this one is a young adult book that sounds so fascinating because it involves some kind of like time loop. It says every 10 years in the strange little town of Lennon, California, one person is chosen to return from the dead, but it says that there's all these rules, like the dead person can only return for 30 days, and we follow this young girl named Wilson who is trying to bring her friend Annie LeBlanc back from the dead. It just sounds like it's gonna be so cute and so interesting. Like, I don't really know what I'm signing up for here. It's really rare for me these days that I take a chance on like young adult books, but this one in particular just really intrigues me, so I can't wait to read it. And then Eric LaRocca, the super kind and amazing horror author, ended up sending me a copy of his next horror book publishing in January that's called At Dark I Become Loathsome. And this one is publishing on January 28th next year, and I am so excited for this because it's another horror novella from this author. This one is sitting at about like 160 pages, and this one just says it's a grim yet gentle, horrifying yet hopeful, intense tale of death, trauma, and love. I don't really need to know anything about this because Eric LaRocca is a must-read author for me. Like, I will literally read anything that this author puts out, so I cannot wait to check out this book soon. And then Berkeley Romance ended up sending me this one called The Seemingly Impossible Love Life of Amanda Dean. And this one's a romance book that has recently published that I just think this sounds like it's gonna be so cute. And from what I understand, this is a romance that follows this girl who's bisexual, and we kind of get to explore her relationships of the past as she's on her wedding day about to get married to someone. It says, now on her wedding day, a day when everything already seems to be going wrong, Mandy must decide if she's willing to risk it all one last time or if she'll escape with her heart still intact. And I guess we just get to read about all of the different times that she's fallen in love in the past with these different people. It just sounds like it's gonna be really cute. I also love this cover. I love books that involve weddings too. I love that it's like a little wedding cake on the cover. I just think this one sounds like it's gonna be a good time, so hopefully it is. And then Flatiron Books ended up sending me a copy of Kate Alice Marshall's newest thriller, which is called A Killing Cold. And this one's coming out in February next year. And you might know the name Kate Alice Marshall from the book What Lies in the Woods, which is like one of my favorite thrillers that I read last year. I gave that one 5 stars. Like, I just really love that book. And this one sounds like it's gonna be such a fun time. It involves this like winter setting. It says, when Theodora Scott met Connor, wealthy, charming, and a member of the powerful Dalton family, she fell in love in an instant. 6 months later, he's brought her to Idlewood, his family's isolated winter retreat, to win over his skeptical relatives. Ew, but then it says, then in an abandoned cabin, Theo finds something impossible, a photo of herself as a child, a photo taken at Idlewood. It says she has no memory of her earliest years, but now she's starting to piece the fragments together. Oh, that sounds so creepy and so weird and disturbing, like a picture of her as a kid. I am just so excited for this because I really do like this author's writing and I have very great feelings about this book. I think it's gonna be such a great book to read in the winter time, and I can't wait. So thanks to Flatiron Books for sending me a copy. One book that I got sent from Penguin Teen is this one called Come Out, Come Out, which this one is a young adult horror book that is published recently that sounds really interesting. You know, as I mentioned, I'm not really that big into young adult these days, so for me to take a chance on a young adult book, it has to have a good premise for me to do that. And in this story, we're following these young teens where I believe like one of their friends has gone missing, and then the story takes place 5 years later when they're all seniors in high school. It says that this story calls out the systems that erase gay, queer, and trans identity, giving space to embrace queerness and to unleash the power of friendship and found family against the real monsters in the world. It just sounds like it's gonna be a good time and like maybe the perfect October read, so I just decided to pick this one up. I think it sounds good. And then I'm so excited because Tor ended up sending me a copy of The Nightmare Before Christmas, and this one sounds so fun. It sounds like a fun play obviously on The Nightmare Before Christmas, and it's like Halloween and Christmas. And it says, get ready for this sexy, quirky rom-com where the golden-hearted prince of Christmas falls for the totally off-limits prince of Halloween. Like, does that not sound so fun? And like bringing two of the best holidays together, Christmas and Halloween, like I am so here for this. I also love, this one has like the sprayed edges. It is just so beautiful and so stunning. I think I'm gonna try to read this one around Christmas time because it's really rare for me to want to read books that are about Christmas, but the fact that this is gonna be like a Christmas and Halloween situation makes it sound so much more fun and right up my alley, so I can't wait to check this one out. And then, oh my gosh, Pantheon ended up sending me a copy of Final Cut by Charles Burns, and this one is a horror graphic novel that is so huge, by the way. Oh my gosh, I was not expecting this to be this big, but I'm so excited to check out this book because this is from the same author as Black Hole, I think is the previous book that I've read from this author, and they just have some really unique and really interesting ideas. I also love the art style in these graphic novels. Like, there's so much color, and I just think they're always like done so well, so I cannot wait to read this one. I'm hoping that I can get to this in the month of October because this feels like it's gonna have all of the perfect October vibes. But like, wow, what an amazing piece of art, and just like look at that opening, like the end papers, like this is so stunning. This is beautiful. I thought I would also show a quick little library haul because I have been using my library so much lately, and I always want to promote promote, you know, like using your local libraries, because it's not only good for you and your wallet, but it's also really good for your local community to use your libraries. And if you didn't know, you not only can use your local library for like books, but you can also use your local library for audiobooks through Libby. Like there's an app called Libby if you didn't know. There's also an app called Canopy that you can look into where you can rent movies from your library to stream. There's just so many great resources at your local library, so I highly encourage you to check it out. But some of the books that I've recently hauled from my library include The Hitchcock Hotel, which I am so excited to read this book very soon, hopefully. This one sounds very, you know, Hitchcock inspired, and that just has me so intrigued and so excited to read it, so hopefully I'll get to this one very soon. I also picked up a copy of Woman Eating because I've been so curious about this one, and I've been hearing so many people talking about it and saying that they really think that I would like it, especially after how much I ended up enjoying A Certain Hunger. And so I did end up checking out Woman Eating. I don't know how soon I'll be able to get around to reading this. Hopefully I will before it's due back to the library, but very cool that my library has a copy of it. I also ended up picking up these copies of Ein Hollow and then Nothing But the Rain because these are two short horror stories, and I have a readathon coming up at the end of October called Short and Spooky that I'm going to be doing with my Patreon. So I've just been trying to get my hands on anything that's like short horror. Both of these books sound so interesting and are both on the shorter side, so I can't wait to read both of these soon. And then I also picked up this one called Tiny Nightmares, which this one, from my understanding, is a bunch of different collections of like short little horror stories. It says that this is spine-tingling flash fiction that terrifies and delights. So I think that this collection, like each one of these stories is only about like a page or maybe 2 to 3 pages long. Like it looks like all the stories are really short. And I've been seeing this at Barnes & Noble for like literally forever, and I'm always like, what is that? Like that just looks so cute. So I decided to check it out for my library to see if it's any good. And then Steph was so kind enough to send me the book In the Miso Soup off my Amazon wishlist. In the Miso Soup is a book that I've been hearing about for years, that I've just been so curious about. And something that really intrigues me about this book is the fact that it takes place in Tokyo. It says that this takes place just before New Year's Eve. It says Frank, an overweight American tourist, has hired Kenji to take him on a guided tour of Tokyo's sleazy nightlife. But Frank's behavior is so strange that Kenji begins to entertain a horrible suspicion that his new client is in fact the serial killer currently terrorizing the city. Like what the heck? It just sounds like it's gonna be so unique. I've heard that this book is really weird, but honestly, like the weirder this book is, the better. I can't wait to check it out and read this book soon. I'm so excited, so thank you to Steph. Also, thank you so much to Lee Smith for sending me a copy of Fangirl Volume 4. This is the 4th and final book in the series. If you haven't heard, they recently adapted Fangirl into manga, and Fangirl is like one of my favorite books ever by Rainbow Rowell. It's like one of my biggest comfort reads, and I'm so glad that they ended up adapting the story into manga because I feel like it translates to manga very well, and this series was just so amazing to read. I loved every single one of these volumes, and it's just been so special to get to revisit this story and these characters in a different format like this. I just loved this so freaking much, and I own all 4 of these volumes now. I'm gonna keep them on my shelves forever and reread them all the time. I just love this so much, so thank you so much to Lee for sending me this one. And then very recently, Alicia ended up sending me 2 books off my Amazon wishlist as well. She ended up sending Intercepts by TJ Payne as well as The Final Scene by Steph Nelson. And Intercepts is a book that I had personally never even heard of until like a few weeks ago when my friend Brittany was reading this book, and it just sounded like it was going to be so interesting because it's a horror book that takes place in this lab. They're doing like human experimentation on all of these people, and then things go very wrong. It sounds like it's going to be really interesting, and I actually recently just read this book for a vlog that you can expect from me very soon. And then she also ended up sending me this one called The Final Scene, which this one is a thriller that I had never even heard of until my friend Jan recently read this in a reading vlog, and the way that she was talking about this book, and she gave it such a high rating that I was like, okay, like that sounds really intriguing. I just had to add it to my TBR because it sounds so interesting. And this one also takes place in an isolated cabin on the Oregon coast. It sounds like it's going to be intense, and from what I heard from Jan's review, this is going to be a very fast-paced and just very intense read, so I can't wait to check it out. And then the final stack of books that I have for this video are all the books that I've bought recently within these last couple of weeks. 2 of the books that I've bought recently came from Aardvark Book Club, which is like one of my favorite book subscription services now, and I recently picked up So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison as well as Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. I actually recently did end up reading So Thirsty, and unfortunately this one just didn't really work for me. It was around a 2-star, but I was really curious to read this one because it involves vampires, and I keep talking about how like I'm kind of in my vampire era right now. And so I'm still so glad that Aardvark had this one as a copy because this was definitely one of my most anticipated, even though it didn't end up working out for me. But then I also picked up a copy of Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle from Aardvark because I gave this book 5 stars and I really loved it. And when I read it, I had only listened to this one on audio, so I really wanted to own a physical copy. And I really love the Aardvark books in person. They have this like feel to them. They're very like, they feel like matte material. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but I love the material that Aardvark uses when they publish these books. I don't know, it's just so nice. So I ended up getting Bury Your Gaze because it's one of my favorite horror books that I've read this year, and I can see myself wanting to reread this in the future, so I really wanted to own a copy, and I'm glad that I do. I also just picked up a copy of this book called The Traitors from Half Price Books, mainly because the cover of this reminds me of that reality game show called The Traitors that I'm currently obsessed with, even though this one has probably nothing to do with it. But it's about these people who get this invitation to this like crumbling mansion, and then there's murder, of course. It just sounds like it'll be a fun time. I also picked up a copy of Forget Me Not. I found this copy at a used bookstore, and then I did end up reading this in a reading vlog at the end of September, and I gave this book 5 stars. It's one of my new favorite romance books. I loved it so much. Like, I'm so glad that I decided to read this book because it is so up my alley for like everything that I love in a romance book. And then I also recently bought a copy of The Rust Maidens. This is a book that I ended up buying for a video idea that I had that I later on ended up canceling. So I don't have any immediate plans to read this one, but this is one that I am really excited about because it's from the same author as The Haunting of Velkwood, which is a horror book that I read earlier this year that I really enjoyed. So I am very curious to check this one out eventually as well. And then I also recently just hauled another horror novella that is called To Be Devoured. And this is a book that I hauled very recently because I'm going to be reading it for a video very soon. It'll actually be the next video that I post after this one. So you'll see my thoughts on this horror novella very soon. But yeah, those are all of the books that I have hauled in these last recent couple of weeks. I know this was so many books. I have a stack of maybe like 50 to 60 books sitting next to me. This is crazy and overwhelming, but thank you so much for watching. I'm so excited and so grateful to have all of these books in my possession. Like, I don't even know what to read next. I'm so excited. You'll have to let me know if you've read any of these books. What are your thoughts on them? Please do let me know. And which books do you think that I should prioritize? Like, which one should I try to read first? I think some of my top priority are definitely some of these books that I got from the library. Like, this is one that I'm considering taking to Chicago with me so that I can read it. Maybe I'll read it before I even go to Chicago. I don't know. I'm so excited to read The Hitchcock Hotel. So that is going to be all from me. Thank you so much for watching this book haul, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye!